Now, it's emerged tonight that the Prime Minister's chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, travelled out of London during the lockdown whilst ill with coronavirus symptoms. Well, our political correspondent, Leila Nathoo, is at Westminster for us this evening. Leila, did he break the lockdown?
Well, Clive, it was back on the 30th of March that we found out that Dominic Cummings had come down with coronavirus symptoms. Downing Street said at the time that he was self-isolating at home. But tonight, The Guardian and the Mirror newspapers are reporting that subsequently he in fact travelled to his parents' home in Durham and that police made contact with the family to remind them of the rules around essential travel. Now, the guidance at the time that was made law just a few days before said there were only a limited number of reasons why people should be leaving their homes. And if you have coronavirus symptoms yourself, the guidance was and is that you shouldn't be leaving your homes at all for at least 7 days. Now, a source close to Dominic Cummings has confirmed that he did travel from London to Durham when he had coronavirus, but says he wasn't spoken to by police. The source says he and his wife stayed in a separate building, and the reason they travelled there was because they were both ill and needed help with childcare. Now, remember, there have been other senior figures who've been accused of breaking lockdown rules. Scotland's former Chief Medical Officer Catherine Calderwood, who had to resign. Professor Neil Ferguson, a leading scientist advising the government, also had to step down from his role. Opposition parties are tonight questioning Dominic Cummings' position. It is certainly very awkward for Number 10, who say they aren't going to comment.
OK, Leila, thank you. Leila Nathoo there at Westminster. Anyone arriving in the UK from abroad could face a £1,000 fine if they fail to self-isolate for 14 days. The government will introduce the proposal from the 8th of June to help prevent a second wave of coronavirus infections. With more, here's our transport correspondent, Tom Burridge.
Soon, almost anyone arriving into the UK will have to self-isolate for 2 weeks. Most people on this flight from Amsterdam into Manchester thought it was a good idea.
We've just come off a KLM flight. It was absolutely jam-packed full of people. And who knows who's got coronavirus?
After some confusion, the government now says only people arriving from the Republic of Ireland will be exempt. Medical workers will too, and people like lorry drivers who transport goods. Fruit pickers won't be able to travel away from the place they work. Anyone who flouts the new rules could face a £1,000 fine. The Home Secretary said it was the right time for this measure.
And as the transmission rate across the United Kingdom falls and the number of travellers arriving in the UK begins to increase, imported cases could begin to pose a larger and increased threat.
Is it fair to assume now that most summer holidays abroad will not happen this year?
This is absolutely not about booking holidays. We have to be clear about, we want to avoid a second wave, and that is absolutely vital.
But the travel sector, already battered during the pandemic, will be hit even harder. Airlines believe mandatory masks, gloves and temperature checks will be enough to get more flights moving safely again.
Sadly, it's like a lot of Boris Johnson's strategies. It's just make it up as you go along.
The boss of Ryanair says the quarantine is
bonkers and unimplementable. I mean, the real issue here is the people arriving into the UK, take for example Heathrow and Gatwick, then get on the London Underground or the Gatwick Express to get into London to wherever it is they're supposed to isolate. So the whole purpose of isolation is defeated.
And this travel agent in Surrey currently has no summer bookings.
I think it will be the final nail in the coffin for mine and many other businesses if this continues. I can't realistically see customers necessarily wanting to self-isolate for 2 weeks after they come back.
Bilateral deals with countries with low infection rates, known as air bridges, are possible in the future. But when it takes effect on June the 8th, the quarantine will be a blanket measure. It will be reviewed every 3 weeks. Tom Burridge, BBC News.